This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The U.S. kills a planner of the ISIS-K group in an airstrike as some nations end air evacuations in Kabul. A new report leaves the U.S. intelligence community divided over the origins of COVID-19. And joy in Nigeria as 90 children reunite with families after being released by kidnappers. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Ethiopia risks losing privileged access to U.S. markets over alleged human rights violations. And in sports, Cristiano Ronaldo makes Manchester United return. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Great to have you along with us for this hour. Let's begin in Afghanistan, where the U.S. military says it has carried out a drone strike against an Islamic State planner in the east of Afghanistan. This comes a day after an attack outside Kabul's airport, which killed 170 people, including 13 U.S. servicemen. Well, Zamarlai Abasan reports from Kabul.
And the situation regarding to the airstrike by the U.S. drones is reported, and I've been talking with the locals, yet the exact spot that they have hit is not clear, and if they are the affiliated of Kabul airport twin blast or not, it's not yet clear, but there is a report of the target of a drone, and drones were flying over the sky of eastern Nangarhar province and probably closer to Achin district, and yet we need to confirm. Taliban have entered to Kabul airport. The Taliban special forces, which they call it Victorious Force, are now located in 3 military spots of Kabul airport, and the Americans evacuated, and they're located just in one part, and the evacuation process have been continuing. It's now only U.S. who has been doing evacuation process, while there are a lot of problems. People cannot reach the area, even though they said they hold visas and they're eligible to go there. Yet many people erupted again to Kabul airport, and there is an alarming situation by U.S. State Department that potential more similar attacks to Thursday attacks are on the way. That's why the people who want to flee should evacuate the area and just stay home.
The United Nations and many countries have expressed shock and condemned the Kabul airport attacks, urging all parties to help ensure people's safety.
This was a hideous assault on desperate civilians, and we hope those responsible are caught and brought to justice as soon as possible.
China is shocked to see the heavy casualties caused by the explosion near Kabul airport. We strongly condemn the attacks. This incident shows that Afghanistan's security situation is still complicated and severe. We hope all parties will take the effective measures to ensure a smooth transition and ensure the safety of Afghan citizens and foreigners.
We strongly condemn this terrorist attack. We have seen reports of many casualties. Unfortunately, the incident confirms the early prediction that extremist groups in Afghanistan are taking advantage of the chaotic situation there. Everyone in the country faces considerable risks. Russia is concerned about the situation in Afghanistan.
U.S. intelligence agencies have released a report on COVID-19 origins tracing. The report says the virus was not developed as a biological weapon, but most agencies remain divided over 2 theories: natural exposure to an infected animal or a laboratory-associated incident. The Chinese embassy in Washington has denounced the report, saying it's not scientifically credible. Zhou Jiaxin reports.
The 2 possibilities that the U.S. intelligence report highlights were actually included in a March report by experts from WHO in China on Wuhan mission. And after their field work at wet markets, labs, and hospitals early this year, they concluded that the natural origin is very likely, while the lab origin is extremely unlikely. So the unclassified report from the U.S. further judges that the virus was not developed as a biological weapon, not genetically engineered, adding some other agencies involved believe that there was not sufficient evidence to make assessment at the moment. And that's why virologists I previously spoke with did not expect that the report would really bringing in new information, and they believe that it will be a rehash of the evidence that's been available until now. Some of them argue that the Biden administration was doing this in order to satisfy internal political pressures to try to diffuse some of the pressures coming from element of the Republican Party. And the Chinese embassy in the United States said in a statement that the report is not scientifically credible, adding that the U.S. claims of China's lack of transparency an excuse for Washington's politicizing and stigmatizing campaign. On the raw data issues, leaders on the WHO Wuhan mission made it clear about the international practice that there are restrictions on privacy law that forbid the sharing of data, including details to outsiders, and that's exactly the same in most countries in the world. Now, scientists say the next step is to seek earliest evidence of the virus, and they take antibodies in samples found before the Wuhan outbreak in various places as a key indicator, and they call on scientists and politicians to join forces to expedite the next phase of traceback research. And Beijing says it is always willing to support and join the scientific studies, but opposing the political manipulation.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel says her country will offer up to 70 million COVID-19 vaccines to Africa this year. Merkel's announcement on Friday marks an increase from the 30 million doses the European nation previously pledged to donate. She made the announcement after a summit with African leaders on the G20's Compact with Africa initiative. The initiative aims to promote private investment in Africa. Meanwhile, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa expressed disappointment at the unfairness witnessed in the distribution of vaccines, which has seen only 2% of the 1.3 billion population in Africa accessing jabs.
And we expressed a lot of unhappiness of this inequality that currently exists. And we said that there needs to be more equality, there needs to be fairness, and it is to this end that South Africa and India made a proposal to the World Trade Organization that there should immediately be a temporary suspension of the intellectual property rights so that vaccine production should be spread to other countries as well, because it's very dangerous and even reckless to have vaccines just being produced in just a few countries in the north and none being done on the African continent.
The availability and production of vaccines is closely linked to the economic well-being of the African continent. And if today it is the case that we have vaccinated more than 60% of our population, and in Africa it is 2%, then this is of course a dramatic injustice that we need to urgently correct. And we talked about this today very honestly. And I think that possibilities can be created to produce vaccines step by step and to transfer technology.
Ugandan security forces have arrested a suspected suicide bomber whom officials say was plotting to blow up mourners attending the funeral of Major General Paul Lokech, a former commander of the AU mission in Somalia. A manhunt continues for unknown numbers of accomplices. It's reported that President Yoweri Museveni was to attend the funeral, but he didn't. Isabel Nkiria reports.
The suspect, Abdul Katumba, was found with an assortment of materials used for making homemade bombs. Among the things officials confiscated were homemade bombs, bomb carrier bags, detonators, a suicide vest, and a mobile phone used to detonate explosives. The Ugandan army says it was tipped off of Katumba's intention to disrupt the funeral of the former AMISOM commander Paul Lokech in Padar district. Joint security forces consisting of the army and the police picked him up from a guest house in Padar, the home district of the late Major General Paul Lokech. The military says an unknown number of accomplices are still on the run and that they are trying to track them down. President Museveni, who didn't attend the funeral, accused the ADF rebel group for plotting to kill people at the funeral. Major General Lokech served as the head of the AU mission in Somalia in mid-2000 and died earlier this month of natural causes. AMISOM says Lokech will be remembered for being a brave and strategic fighter who was instrumental in driving out the militant group Al-Shabaab from Mogadishu. This earned him the name Lion of Mogadishu. Security is tight in Padera district and at the home of the former AMISOM commander, Paul Lokech. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Nearly 100 Nigerian school children kidnapped from an Islamic seminary have been reunited with their families. The students were snatched by gunmen in late May in northwest Niger State. The head teacher at the Tajina Seminary School said 92 children were released along with 2 other Christian students taken from a nearby village. Officials have not released details on the process of release. Parents say that they spent 3 months selling property for ransom. About 1,000 pupils have been abducted in Nigeria since December. Now, most have been released after negotiations, while others remain captive in forest camps.
I am happy to announce that finally we have received them, and they are seated behind you. You can see them. They arrived in the early hours of this morning, and since then the medical officials have been attending to them to ensure their health status.
I have a child and I'm very, very happy. I give God all the glory. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Thank God they are back healthy, hale and healthy, and we are happy. Thank God.
Ethiopia is sounding the alarm over a humanitarian crisis in the country's north as fighting continues in 2 regions neighboring Tigray. The government says in 1 week, more than 200,000 people have been displaced. Now, this is in the territories of Afar and Amhara, where attacks there have been blamed on the outlawed Tigray People's Liberation Front. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
The Ethiopian government says more than 4 million people have been affected by recent fighting in the areas of Afar and Amhara in the northern region of the country. These areas border the conflict-affected Tigray region.
The number of displaced in the Amhara and Afar regions have surpassed 500,000. In our last briefing session, the estimation was around 300,000. Now we see that it has surpassed 500,000. And this requires urgent humanitarian assistance to these communities that have been displaced as a result.
In the Tigray region, conflict between the government and the TPLF has been going on since November last year. The government says it has reduced checkpoints from 7 to 3 to enable the efficient transit of humanitarian assistance to over 4 million people in need of emergency help within the Tigray region. But humanitarian agencies say access is still slow. The government says insecurity is largely to blame.
Initially, the government had arranged for 4 inlets into the Tigray region to facilitate humanitarian access, but as you all know and are familiar, the numerous attacks by the TPLF has rendered these 3 other inlets inaccessible, and the existing corridor is still faced with intermittent access disruptions due to attacks by the TPLF.
The United Nations says no trucks with humanitarian supplies have entered Tigray since 20th August. The World Food Programme says for sufficient assistance to the region, it needs about 100 trucks to be arriving daily, which is not happening. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more news stories. Here's what's ahead. Concerns rise over reemergence of polio in parts of Africa.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent. to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Let's bring you up to speed with some of the stories we have on our radar. Let's turn our attention to Uganda, where the country is on high alert after scientists detected a strain of the polio virus from samples collected in the capital, Kampala. Africa was declared wild polio free in August 2020 by the World Health Organization, but scientists say a more deadly strain has re-emerged. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria reports.
Benon Kabusu got crippled after suffering from polio when he was 4 years old. This left one of his legs disabled. He now walks with crutches. Benon says the disease still has a long-lasting effect on his leg.
This virus continues to eat you up. The affected limbs keep losing strength and become thinner as years go by.
Patients with polio show signs of flu and high fevers, but in 10% of cases, it weakens the nerves in the limbs, causing permanent paralysis or even death. In the early 1980s, polio was common, partly because of scarcity of vaccines. Benon is now 40 years old and regrets never having gotten the polio jab.
Vaccination is good because it prevents infections. I wish our parents knew about all these effects. Some of us would not be like this. From what we see now, finding a young child crippled from polio is very rare.
Scientists in Uganda say the polio virus has been detected in the capital's sewage system, posing a public health emergency. The World Health Organization has listed polio as one of diseases targeted for eradication, and health systems globally are carrying out surveillance to detect its resurgence. No case of polio has been found in children in Uganda yet, but health officials say there is a high risk of infection.
If the sewage plant is able to discharge polio virus, the catchment area of that sewage system is at risk. And since this is the central division of Kampala, which is the business hub of this country, where everyone converges, it also means that the risk is not only limited to Kampala, but upcountry as well.
Open your mouth. Health officials advise on eating hot, well-cooked food and washing hands after using the toilet to stop the spread. The country will be rolling out mass vaccination against polio in children below 5 years to boost their immunity starting October. Scientists in Uganda say the resurgence of polio is due to the reduced routine immunization. The country is now aiming to reach 8 million children with a door-to-door mass immunization campaign with the hope of wiping it out. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
1 year after the World Health Organization declared Nigeria wild polio free, the nation is now battling another form of polio. Health officials say over 100 cases of circulating vaccine-derived polio virus have been detected in Nigeria since last year. Correspondent Philly Hauser reports from Abuja.
One of the last polio vaccination exercises in 2019, before Nigeria was declared free of the wild polio virus in August 2020. A year down the road, authorities are intensifying efforts to contain circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus type 2 detected in some parts of the country.
Yes, technically speaking, it came from a weakened poliovirus that is in the environment. But if a child is vaccinated against all types of poliovirus, whether it's under routine immunizations or whether it's during the campaign, they won't get it. So we have this problem because of low routine immunizations coverage, and because during the campaign, maybe not enough children are being vaccinated.
And this is blamed on the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown last year, which disrupted routine immunization campaigns for polio, coupled with challenges of poor access to rural communities and insecurity. Polio is a viral disease that affects the nervous system and can cause paralysis if people are not vaccinated as infants. The UN says the polio-free status of the country is not affected since it's not the wild polio virus, and in collaboration with the government and other partners, there is a high response to tackling this new outbreak already.
The GPI and leaders of African governments are committed to stopping the outbreaks. The governments restarted vaccination, as I mentioned, in July 2020, and are implementing new tools and tactics to better reach every child with polio vaccines to ensure high population immunity as part of a new strategy. Because currently, the level of immunity of our children to most childhood diseases, including polio, are hovering around 50% and in some cases much less.
The Nigerian government says it is also moving to address the problem of low infrastructure and insecurity seriously so that health workers can easily access affected regions. And those efforts have started to pay off.
Since March 2021, we have been conducting outbreak response in the various states that have been impacted by this outbreak of vaccines-derived poliovirus. Last week, we've just completed an outbreak response in several states, including FCT, Adamawa, Plateau, Kaduna, and Nasarawa.
The focus is on children less than 5 years.
Authorities say they are optimistic that with ongoing efforts in partnership with organizations like UNICEF, there'll be no polio case by the end of the year. That could ensure a more healthy and productive population for Nigeria, both now and in the future. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
This week, authorities in Libya approved the establishment of 8 new political parties. It's a step that signals preparations for the December elections, although key election laws are yet to be set. Tribes and politicians are grouping to form coalitions for the upcoming parliamentary elections. Here is CGTN's Adel Al-Mafroui with more.
After decades of a total absence of political parties under President Gaddafi, in the 10 years following the uprising, Libya established more than 130, thanks to a 2012 law that allowed anyone to establish a political entity with just 250 endorsement letters, which later went down to just 50. Yet in UN-led political transition talks, party representation was not significant next to tribal and ideological affiliations.
The events that Libya went through gave more power to the voice of guns rather than politicians. There were people who wanted to impose their opinions through guns. This has threatened to divide the country. I believe that the next period will see a bigger role for political parties, and I believe that that will save Libya from falling into chaos once again.
Political parties are expected to have a quota of the parliament seats in the upcoming elections. That has encouraged many to register a party. This week, the Libyan Justice Ministry approved 8 new ones.
Libyans are frustrated from the past election experiences. They saw some figures who are barely recognized in their own neighborhoods rise to prominent positions in the country. Libyans who lived abroad came to suddenly become members of parliament. That's not in the country's favor. Our prime mission is to encourage people to participate in the upcoming elections so that that doesn't happen once again.
Critics are less optimistic, however. They believe that the Libyan conflict has not crossed the armed conflict stage yet.
I don't think political parties will be of any use at this current stage. The West is pushing for a move so that they can announce that they have established a democracy in Libya through establishing political parties. All these are fake slogans because the foreign influence that ruined the country still remains in Libya. If anything, Libya needs to get rid of that before establishing political parties.
While the path to the December election remains unclear, some Libyan politicians have started to prepare for them nonetheless. Rival groups may be still pointing arms towards one another, but these political party founders hope they can shift the conflict from arms to political debates. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Ras Sidr, Egypt.
The Algerian foreign minister this week carried a written message of support from Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune to the Tunisian president. Kais Saied also received a high-level delegation from Saudi Arabia. Saudi officials expressed the kingdom's backing for the Tunisian head of state in his recent moves. Adnan Shawashi reports.
The Tunisian president received Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs Ramatan Lamamra in Carthage Palace. This is the third visit made by the head of Algerian diplomacy to the capital city Tunis since July 25th, when President Saied dismissed the prime minister, froze parliament, and lifted the immunity of MPs.
Our meetings aim to strengthen the bilateral ties between Algeria and Tunisia. We are working together on more effective coordination in order to speak with one common voice. It's the voice of wisdom and responsibility of two brotherly people who are looking together for a better future for Algeria and Tunisia and all the people in the region.
Political analysts maintain that the authorities in Tunis and Algiers have developed a strategic plan to face a growing terror and security threat on the border regions.
The security issue is a top priority and a major concern for Tunisia and Algeria. The Algerian foreign minister noted that he discussed important security topics. The situation is very dangerous in the mountainous areas between the two countries, with the presence of terrorist groups who fled conflict zones to establish new bases in North Africa. Algeria supports all the decisions made by the Tunisian president.
Saudi State Minister for African Affairs analysts say that the Saudi position is not limited to the open political support. It also includes economic aid and the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic.
Saudi Arabia has pledged to stand by Tunisia economically. The Saudi authorities helped Tunis in the fight against the pandemic by donating over 1 million doses of the vaccine, medical equipment and field hospitals. Saudi Arabia wants to provide favorable economic and health conditions to guarantee Tunisia's stability. Riyadh is also capable of pushing for more support for Tunis from Arab and Gulf countries.
During a telephone conversation with President Saied, King Salman of Saudi Arabia welcomed the steps taken by the Tunisian head of state. King Salman reiterated his country's readiness to support the North African state in all areas and stand alongside the Tunisian people. The Tunisian president expressed full commitment to increase consultations with Algeria so as to achieve security and stability in the two countries and help overcome the threats facing the region. Kais Saied also informed Saudi officials that his decisions are meant to protect Tunisia from the risk of collapsing. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The African Union has appointed Olusegun Obasanjo, former president of Nigeria, as the High Representative for the Horn of Africa region. The AU Commission chairperson says this decision is aimed at promoting peace, security, stability, and political dialogue in the Horn of Africa region. Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
The former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo is tasked with seeking engagement with relevant political actors and stakeholders in the Horn of African region. He is expected to push for solutions to support durable peace and stability within the region. Ethiopia is engaged in a protracted conflict in its northern region where it is fighting an outlawed group, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Eritrea has been accused by the UN of involving itself in this conflict by sending soldiers to Ethiopia's northern region. Ethiopia and Sudan are feuding over Ethiopia's operation of its Grand Renaissance Dam and have a land border dispute too. Somalia is facing an internal political crisis as the government and the opposition are yet to agree on an elections roadmap. Somalia also has a maritime border conflict with Kenya that keeps shaking their diplomatic ties. And recently, Somalia accused Kenya of political interference in its internal affairs and even cut ties for a while. Obasanjo is expected in the region soon to assist the African Union in its efforts to try and solve this and other challenges. Coletta Njohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Lots more to come on Africa Live, including Ethiopia risks losing privileged access to U.S. markets over alleged human rights violations. And the transformative initiative that creates green spaces from dump sites in Nairobi.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. More than 70% of Nigerians, and that's about 150 million people, use harmful fuels for cooking, according to the UN. A Nigerian entrepreneur is now echoing government efforts to help people adopt safer cooking methods. Here's correspondent Philly Haza with more on this story from Abuja.
For more than 12 years now, Grace Emmanuel has been cooking with firewood. She says she's aware of the hazards, but she has no choice because she lacks money to switch to gas.
I know how dangerous it is to cook with firewood. In fact, I have done 2 procedures on my eyes as a result of being exposed to excessive smoke all the time. But it's expensive to buy cooking gas or a stove. Rather, I just get 3 stones and woods from the bush without paying anything to cook.
Firewood is available, affordable and easy to use, but releases thick smoke and is known as a dirty fuel. The WHO 3,000 Nigerian women and children die annually or develop chronic respiratory diseases from this kind of smoke. In order to help reduce dirty fuel casualties in Nigeria, entrepreneur Happy Amos makes energy-saving stoves that use up to 60% less charcoal and with far less emission, as verified by the International Center for Energy, Environment and Development.
This is the combustion chamber. It is made of ceramic. We treated the ceramic so that it becomes insulative instead of just a heat mass. So when you load your charcoal briquettes right here and you open the air gate for air and you light it either using just small twigs of wood or little paper, and you light it. Usually we advise that you light the cook stove outside and then you can take it into a well ventilated kitchen and then you can cook with it. You see the pot will sit right above the fire, so we do not have heat escaping basically. So that means that all your heat is directed to your pot. It cooks your food fast. It reduces the quantity of charcoal you will use per time. It is tested to be about 60-65% efficient.
And at her factory, Happy is also training locals on how to use these energy-saving stoves called Happy Stoves. The stoves are sold to women in rural areas for less than $10 with an option of a staggered payment plan. But that's still too high for millions of Nigerians who live below $2 a day.
It is much more expensive than you getting 3 stones from your backyard. So, and with the high inflation rate in the country at the moment, the cost of production is very high. And to be profitable and remain in business, the cost of the price will have to go high too.
She wants more support to increase production, distribution and training across Nigeria, and the government says it's already working on that.
The government has launched a cooking gas expansion program that aims to reach about 30 million households by 2025. It is also concluding plans to scale up locally made improved stove technologies in rural areas with more manufacturers and trainers like Happy.
The hope is that these efforts are enough to save people from being exposed to dirty fuels. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Let's turn our attention to Ethiopia, where the humanitarian crisis in the northern region could affect its eligibility to export goods to the U.S. under the African Growth and Opportunity Act. In a virtual meeting with Ethiopian Chief Trade Negotiator Mamo Mehertu, U.S. Trade Representative Richard Nta raised the issue of alleged human rights violations in the region of Tigray, which erupted in November 2020 and has now spread to neighboring regions. The UN adds that war crimes may have been committed by all parties to the conflict. Ethiopia exported goods worth $239 million to the U.S. in 2019 under the AGOA. By June 2021, Ethiopia had exported $128.7 million worth of goods under the program, consisting of apparel and leather products. Grounded national airline South African Airways has confirmed that it will be back in the skies, servicing the Johannesburg-Cape Town route and 5 continental African destinations from September the 23rd. Angela Coppola has the story.
SAA has been grounded since March last year, when the country went into a COVID-19 hard lockdown. The announcement comes ahead of the completion of a due diligence of the airline by a prospective buyer, the Takatsu Consortium.
Before the due diligence was completed, it seemed particularly inexplicable that they were going to paint themselves into a corner by announcing a start date, because if they're then compelled to start, essentially they're using a lot of global airlines resources, which is part of the Takatsu Consortium, then the consortium would probably be able to pretty much dictate the terms of the strategic equity partnership.
Some questions have been raised about SAA entering the highly competitive passenger segment, when initial indications were that they would restart operations in the cargo sector first.
We've now got Comair back in the market with its BA and Kulula brands. So there's enormous oversupply in the domestic passenger market and even in the regional market, with Airlink having stepped in and eaten up a lot of the routes that were being operated by SA Express and will now be operated by SAA. The only routes that may work for SAA would seem to be the Accra route and the Kinshasa route, as they don't have immediate competition on those.
Concerns have been raised about the airline's current business plan developed by the business rescue practitioners.
And honestly, the numbers are appalling. The original business rescue plan was completely unrealistic when it was calling for a break-even with loads in the order of 60%. Now, no airline really can survive with 60% loads these days. You need to be looking at 70% as a minimum, more commonly 75%. The new numbers are indicating that the business plan is in fact suggesting a 25% load factor. And that just means that the airline is going to be hemorrhaging cash at an absolutely extraordinary rate.
It's been a long time coming, but SAA is finally going to get off the ground, and hopefully it'll be sustainable and stay off the ground. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
For street vendors in countries like Egypt, traffic jams offer a perfect opportunity to hawk their wares to motorists while avoiding run-ins with authorities. The vendors sell a wide range of assorted products, and CGTN's Yasser Hakim met with one that sells fruit.
Fathiya is taking a rest after selling fruits in the street all day.
I have 4 children. My husband is dead at a young age of 45, so I am the one providing for the family by selling in the streets instead of begging from anyone. This is better. I never knew anything about sales, but the circumstances I mentioned forced me to this. My husband was a seller and I took over from him. I sell fruits. 2 of my children are now married from my income.
Most vendors make use of the traffic jams in Cairo to sell their products.
I'm happy here. I have been in this area for years and people know me. I don't want to move. In the morning I sit here and sell to bypassers, and the rest of the day I sell in the street during heavy traffic. I also go in front of mosques and churches at weekly prayer time because it's crowded, and then I leave just before dark.
This phenomena has spread in the last few decades because of poverty, and Charles Street vendors are a common sight. Largely ignored by previous governments, the current parliament and state officials are taking measures.
For tens of years, this issue has not been given extra attention to legalize their situation. Instead of the seller being in the streets, threatened by harassment or annoyance from certain people, you locate him in a suitable, clean, organized area to showcase his products, and people will go to buy from him at the market, and this will be more profitable for him.
And there's been action on the ground.
Some cities have done this, like Port Said, where they allocated certain parks where they can sell their goods under supervision, not haphazardly in the streets. Legalizing their situation and helping them will achieve several benefits. First, it will solve an accumulating problem for years. Second, you are providing space for businesses to operate legally. Thirdly, getting them off the streets will prevent harassment and annoyance to the people.
The government is planning to adopt this same model around the country soon. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
A decade ago, a patch of land in Nairobi's Dandora area was a dumping ground for the trash of the city's wealthier residents, with scarcely a plant to be seen. Thanks to Charles Gachanga, children can now play on the grass and locals can relax among avocado trees in a neighborhood that formerly reeked of garbage.
A decade ago, this was a steaming dump site where Nairobi's wealthy sent their trash. Now it's a colorful oasis of greenery that had become all but extinct in the low-income neighborhood of Dandora.
It was not easy, as I did the entire drainage and contest corridor from the entrance of Master T's to down here, almost 2 guys, and a third one helped us.
Their project has inspired a network of similar community-built green spaces, 20 in Dandora alone.
We try to bring nature closer to the people because nature is very good even for your mental well-being, you see. And considering the Dandora, that mental state that people are thinking of crime, people are just thinking crime and the negative. We try to bring that positive mental setback to the community.
Although Mustard Seed receives donations from foreign foundations like the Awesome Foundation, maintenance costs are covered by community contributions. Those living near Gashanga's green space pay 100 shillings a month, less than $1, for maintenance.
We cleaned and put the cabros, and our aim was to bring that estate name back. Yeah, we believe that Dandora is not a slum. Dandora is an estate, and that's how we've gotten it back to how it is now.
This new green project presents a great haven of inspiration for creatives. They pay less than $50 to use the space commercially.
It makes us feel, alive. It makes us feel good. Sometimes we even are able to hear birds that we don't usually hear. So it makes us also want to do more of these, plant more trees maybe, and just bring the forest to the hood.
It's clean, it's peaceful. We don't have if you tell somebody that you did a video in this place, you wouldn't probably believe that this is Dandora, yeah? So it has actually tried at least to level us up in a way.
The mission reaches deeper than the terrestrial transformation. Otieno gave up a life of crime after his friends were killed by a justice-seeking mob. He hopes his path working in the gardens will help inspire other young people. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And in other news, the Democratic Republic of Congo plans to make sign language an official language in a bid to reduce the social exclusion of people who lack the sense of hearing. Authorities say the move will help millions of Congolese citizens who are hard of hearing access mainstream education and later on find work. CGTN's Chris Ocharinga reports.
People with hearing impairments undergo a training session in the DRC capital, Kinshasa. Specialist services for the deaf are few across this country that has been plagued by conflict for over 2 decades. That has denied many of them employment opportunities.
The truth is that we people with no sense of hearing are struggling. We feel oppressed because we don't have access to jobs and cannot afford decent housing. Most of our colleagues don't go to school, which is very sad.
They also face challenges getting treatment at public hospitals and participating in elections. This center in Kinshasa is among the few in the DRC that trains people with hearing impairments to acquire skills that can enable them to earn a living. The deaf community in this country has struggled to fend for itself because previous governments abandoned them. The DRC's first Minister for People with Disabilities, Irene Esambo, who has a disability herself, is pushing to make their lives better. She says the government will introduce sign language as an official language in the country to remove the barriers to communication for the deaf.
We carried out research on people with disabilities and found that the deaf make up the largest proportion. We haven't yet got the exact figures, but statistics from previous studies by NGOs and the World Health Organization put the deaf community in the DRC at around 2 million. That's a large number.
Sign language will be taught in schools across the DRC. It will be the 5th official language after Lingala, Swahili, Chiluba, and Kikongo.
I'm very happy to hear that our government will make sign language the 5th official language in the country. Promoting the language will help remove the obstacles to communication that people with hearing impairments face. My goal is to empower the deaf by equipping them with practical skills to enable them get work.
Sign language experts from different provinces are now meeting in Kinshasa to agree on signs that will be taught in schools. The DRC Constitution prohibits the discrimination of people with disabilities, but previous administrations did not put any measures to enforce the law. Authorities hope the introduction of sign language will help the deaf community communicate more easily with the rest of society and access government services. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Ghanaian publishers are looking to promote African literature. They have come together to showcase their books at the 18th edition of the Ghana International Book Fair held in Accra. While publishers want to boost the reading culture among Ghanaians, they say it is more expensive to print the books locally. They want the government to reduce the taxes on printing materials. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai brings us more. Let's take a look.
Samuel Entry promotes books published by Ghanaians and other African writers, but his business took a hit from the COVID-19 pandemic.
From last year up to now, because of the COVID, it's really bad. The market scene is really bad because children are not going to school and selling. Usually we used to go to schools and sell to them, but now it's very hard to go to schools and sell to the students.
Samuel now hopes to make some good sales at this year's fair, themed Ghana, a nation of readers for development. Children's books written by Ghanaians and other African authors are on display at this book fair. Some of the books take the reader through Ghanaian folk tales, while others are works of fiction. Hannah Ejapon has published 3 children's books. She wants parents to encourage their children to read.
Ghanaian children need to read a lot because reading improves your vocabulary. You find new words and also it helps the imagination. Reading is the only place where you can form pictures in your own mind.
Organizers hope the event can help revive a reading culture among children, which some say has dwindled over time.
Some parents find it difficult to buy books for economic reasons. They can't afford the books. Some believe that books are only for passing exams. So children look at books like a form of punishment. So that one makes people, children to run away from books. So the essence of this kind of book fair is to let children know that reading can be fun.
Publishers say books produced locally are more expensive than foreign ones, which is why many people cannot afford them.
When you're printing in Ghana, it's very expensive because of the high charges or high tax on paper and ink. And when you're printing from outside, it's very cheap. And also, they give books from outside. When you're bringing books to the country, the taxes on them are very low, but taxes on paper and ink are high. So all affect the pricing of the books too.
Publishers want the government to reduce taxes on printing materials. They believe the reading habits among Ghanaians can be improved when books are more affordable. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And we are not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Let's take a peek at the headlines.